Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey, before we jump into this episode, I just want to make sure that you get all the free things possible. If you haven't already, you need to get your Self-Love and Sweat free monthly life coaching calendar. Honestly, the way to experience deep change in your life is by doing small little things over time. And so that's what you'll find in this free calendar. You can get it by going to lifelikeLondon.com/calendar. Get yours for free, and let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to the podcast. We have Lane Kennedy. And if you're watching this video, if you're me and you're watching this video, you have the heart emojis on your eyes because looking at Lane and her background and her do good shirt and your bright smile and just the light force I know you are in this world. I'm so grateful to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's so good to be with you, Lunden.
I've just so enjoyed getting to know you over the last, has it been months? Have we ever had a year anniversary of knowing each other yet? I don't know, but it feels like way longer. And
it feels like way longer, but I know, well, we officially met, right?
Was it April?
Yeah.
Okay. April of last year. So we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. But I knew about you way before then. And I was super jealous. I was like, who is this Lunden? I don't understand. She's getting all the attention. That's right. Me, jealous.
Well, ditto, reciprocated.
But now that I know you, I just adore you and just love you. It's so awesome.
Well, thanks for sharing that and for, counting back at it's been since April was our last NABA event in Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like at that event, I was so drawn to you and we got to hang out by the pool a little bit. And I feel like it feels way longer, and maybe it just feels that way because of what we're drawn to in life and the way that our work gets to do its connected thing. But I want you to tell everyone what you do and who you are, and give your little intro. I mean, I can intro you too. Lane is the mindfulness coach of San Francisco. She does amazing work in DNA, and is just a mom, lovely heart. And I feel like that only scratches the surface a little bit. But what's it like doing your thing? What is your favorite part about what you do?
Well, I really think about how everyone's moving about in the world these days. I mean, for the past, I had my son, he's 15. So, 16 years ago, I recognized that society was running at a rapid rate. And when I became a mom, my whole world changed in ways that I had no idea that it would change. And I was already, quote, spiritual. I was already working a spiritual path. But what became evident to me was that I needed something more than that. And I fell into a deeper path of mindfulness out of a spiritual crisis. And I talk about the spiritual crisis all the time in that, I had my son and he was strapped in the back of the car, and I found myself outside of my car yelling and screaming at a stranger because they weren't driving the way that I wanted them to. And, when you have a 2-year-old in your car and you're doing that, that's not okay. when you say that you're quote, living a spiritual path. And so in that moment of crisis, I had this out-of-body experience and really watched myself. And I thought something needs to change. And so luckily for me, I'm very open and curious by nature. And so I started to study mindfulness, and I took my meditation practice more deeply. I'd already studied Buddhism. I lived in Thailand for a while, lived with the monks and studied. So I was like, again, I was already on that path, but I wasn't embodying the work. And I think that's really, really relevant to who I am and what I do today is that I try to embody the mindful life and in all areas, right? Like we have so many boxes, so many avenues, so many roads that we all walk. And sometimes I find that people are just mindful or a certain way in a certain part of their life. And they've, in other areas, they're like hitting burnout and, disruption. And so I really try to practice embodying this mindfulness in all areas of it. And it's a lot of, it's time, it's commitment. It's being in alignment with myself. And when I'm in alignment with myself, I feel like doors open up and I meet really cool people. I mean, that's how I ended up being the mindfulness teacher for the city of San Francisco. I'm able to work with all the organizations here. So all the city government organizations, from the cafeteria staff at all the public schools to the librarians, the first responders, the controllers, who write all the paychecks, like everybody has access to me. And so that's been a really great, experience in bringing mindfulness to a group of people who really are undervalued and overlooked. I feel like city employees are just like told what to do and you have to be a certain way. And so, when they show up and learn how to be more mindful in their life, and it's like a ripple effect that occurs within the city and within their organization. So that's like a part of what I do, which is really fun.
Yeah, I love hearing that because when I signed up for your DNA webinar, there was like a drop down menu that said, "Are you a city employee of the city of
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco?" or something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember just, yeah, thinking like, oh, how lucky those people are to have that access
Mm-hmm.
to all of your tools and all of your wisdom. And like you said, be able to feel supported and recognized in ways that
Mm-hmm.
maybe they don't always feel in the positions that they're in. And I think that,
Yeah.
regardless of what position we hold, incorporating more mindfulness
Yeah.
in the day to day. What is mindfulness to you? How do you define that? Is
Mm-hmm.
it being aware of your thoughts? Is it becoming more aware of your awareness? What is
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness in like that big picture sense to
Mm-hmm.
you, and how you, bring that?
It's really simple for me. It's like being present right here, right now. There is no other moment. There's nothing else that matters except this conversation that I'm having with you, Lunden. Right. And I have like 2 Irish wolfhounds, and I have a son, and I have a husband, and I have a client list that's demanding and right, like things. But none of that matters because if I'm mindful, I'm right here with you, engaged in this moment, which changes my chemistry, which changes the way that we communicate together, which changes our connection and the coherence that we can create. It's like so cool. So that's what mindfulness is. And people have all these ideas of what mindfulness is,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, don't overthink it. Just don't.
Be here now. Yeah. Don't think of, but
No.
yeah, in this present moment, because oftentimes, our mind is ruminating or,
Mhm.
repeating something that's in the past that
Yeah.
we're, not present in this moment, or
Mhm.
worried about something in the future,
Mhm.
or what we need to do next, or, um, yeah, I remember I was like, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. I can't remember specifically, but I just chose to not use the word busy anymore and
Mhm.
said full. And the other day, me and Jen Reno were messaging, and she said something out like, "I know you're busy, or you have a busy day." And I was like, "No, I have a full day." And I shared with her, I'm
Yeah.
like, a long time ago, I decided that I didn't want to be busy and all over the place. And so I would say, "Oh, my schedule's really full today. I had a full day. I had a full week."
Mhm.
And that for me always brought me back to that center present moment of
Mm-hmm.
just like, no, it's full and there's capacity and
Mm-hmm.
abundance and
Mm-hmm.
juiciness in this moment. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being here now is mindfulness. And I think there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, tools and ways we get to access
Mm-hmm.
the reminder of no, be
Mm-hmm.
here now.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your favorite mindfulness tools?
I like pleasant, unpleasant a lot.
What's that?
That's like one of my favorite tools to use. Of just, is the experience pleasant or unpleasant?
Mhm,
The mind again is very judgmental.
mhm,
And if I just put those two categories up, I can navigate the world a lot easier or easily. Um, so I like that tool.
mhm.
Another one is just catching my breath.
Yeah, when you
That's,
did the inhale, whenever I
yeah.
asked you, and you just, not because I was thinking that, but just hearing your breath, I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
just that like audible exhale moment of
Yeah.
just soaking all of that
Hmm.
oxygen.
Hmm. Yeah. Those are two of my favorite where it's, again, really easy, but overlooked,
Yeah.
forgotten.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
is the pleasant, unpleasant one just like a self check in of like, right now in this moment, does it feel good or not feel good? Or where am I at? What is the pleasant, unpleasant?
No, the pleasant unpleasant is a part of mindfulness based stress reduction. It's part of a programming around how you approach your life.
Okay.
And every situation, every action, you have a choice.
Mhm.
Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Is it pleasant to go on a walk? Well, no, because it's raining out. I don't want to be. Or yes, it is.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to get into the dialogue about it because that's where the rumination starts to
Mhm.
affect and like
Mhm.
trickle out into us. So if we can just keep it to those two categories, you can move through things a lot more quickly
Mhm.
and not get stuck.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it. Pleasant,
Hmm.
unpleasant. And yeah, coming back to our breath.
Hmm.
Um, what do you feel like is, I think you said something about mindfulness being like the connection to the present moment or something like that. And of course, on the flip side, there's the disconnect to that we oftentimes can call, you know, insert ailment, whatever. And I know that you have been sober for a
Hmm.
long time. I know that Pat Smith Wellness, who I love, who's also
Yep.
part of our community, who I know
Yep.
we just PSW, shout out to him. He also talks a lot about just, yeah, being in a
Hmm.
space of, numbing and consumption and just
Hmm.
desiring to have that sober life. I also
Hmm.
haven't, I think I've had like 3 or 4 drinks in the last like year and a half, which is like, yeah, so cool, and I can remember just because like friends' birthdays, glasses of wine, and it
Uh-huh.
just, and so I know people listening, right? Whether you, that's a journey you're needing to take or just
Hmm.
desiring to tap into. I know that a disconnect from that present moment can lead us to do all sorts of things and have
Hmm.
things across the board that we're struggling with. And I kind of want to talk about what that disconnect could be like and how you found that reconnection with the present moment and chose that.
I think addiction, and this is where the DNA stuff kind of comes into play, is understanding that uh, addiction and disconnection are related. And it's really driven by our dopamine receptors, which is through our DNA, where I can see what's happening with somebody. And that people will often, like scold themselves and have really horrific conversations of, why can't I stop smoking cigarettes? Or why do I keep drinking? Why do I keep shopping? Why? Like, and then the disconnect is not being in that present moment because they're smoking so much, right? They're doing some kind of addictive behavior. But when I'm able to share with them, like, well, your DNA, you're genetically like, this is your predisposition is this. So what are you going to do to support yourself in not having that run your life? right? So how can you get into the present moment where you're not having that run you? And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a commitment. It
Mhm.
takes like a willingness to go above and beyond. And there's something really dynamic about understanding that it's not your fault, right? That's such a game changer when I
Mhm.
talk to people around it's not your fault. Like,
Like your DNA shows this, and this
right,
is
like
what
this
you're
is
predisposed.
right, like it's generational here, like it's generational,
Mhm.
like 3 generations. Here's the evidence. And here you are, 30, 40, 50 years later dealing with the trauma of, your past. It's been imprinted on you. So now you know this information. So how are you going to change it? How are you going to stay in the present moment with yourself, knowing that you're up against this? And
Mhm.
that's where you start to build tools. That's where you start to really use the NABA community, right? All the coursework that's in there that can support people in shame, right? We have a course around shame. We have a course
Mhm.
around body image. We have a course around mindset and thinking differently, right? We have these beautiful courses that can support people that are suffering from that kind of not being able to get into the present moment quite yet because of their genetics.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
love that awakening.
Yeah, and so what do you see in this genetic testing, or what are you looking at, and what is what do you see when someone's more predisposed to having addictive behavior? And I love what you said too about, or I don't know exactly how you said it, but you didn't say like make it go away. You said like, how are you gonna like do your best when you're up against it, or something very
Right.
like, yeah, like in the game. You got to be like in that present moment, like
Yep.
ready to go, because
Yep.
you never know what quite you're up against in that moment with this.
You you don't know. Like you don't know what you don't know, right? You walk into a dark closet, you don't know what's in there
Mhm.
until you're in there feeling things, right? Like that's kind of the same way with understanding your DNA. It's like you don't know until you actually see it and somebody has a session with you where you can understand it. It's one thing to get your DNA from 23andMe and be like, oh, this is what I am. But it's another to go through a therapeutic session and have it explained to you and then have uh, a plan created so you can get the support. And that's why I think NABA is such like a cool little hub, because somebody who has been, somebody who has an eating disorder, right? Who's binging food and then starving themselves, binging food and starving themselves. And I went through that cycle, so I can talk about it very freely and openly. But somebody who's in that kind of cycle, we have a course in NABA that helps women or men around body shame and how to look at yourself and how to appreciate who you are. Right? That's like a stepping stone to get into the present moment, to
Mhm.
support your genetics, to start making the shift. Because your genes, your DNA, it is who it is. Now you can change the outcome by changing the lifestyle choices that you make. Does
Yeah,
that
so
make
like the
sense?
genetics versus the epigenetics component of
Mhm,
like you
mhm.
have the genes, but are they expressed, and
Are they
are
expressed?
you
Right.
making day-to-day choices in your
Correct.
lifestyle that is going to support like the on or off switch of
Correct.
what's going to be a little bit louder, right? And
Right.
still
Right.
being mindful
Right.
of all the knobs.
Right. Right. Exactly. You have to be mindful of all the knobs because it's not just about one.
Mhm.
There's many.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and you mentioned dopamine.
Mhm.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
That's like more, right? We just want more.
Yeah.
We want to feel more. We
And is
want to
that
do
available on
more.
the genetic testing that you do? Is like looking to see
Oh, yeah.
what
Oh,
is,
yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
working
there's
for
several,
you?
dopamine receptors that I'm able to view,
Mhm.
and each dopamine receptor has a little bit different, mm, leaning
Okay.
towards, like, it's like they're not all the same,
Yeah. Okay.
right? So I can it's like I can see who the person is before I even meet them.
Mhm.
sometimes, because people sometimes will just, order through me, and then I get to do a consult with them,
Cool.
a session.
Mhm.
And I already know who they are when they sit in my chair, which sometimes, some people get a little like, oh, you're not, it's like, are you a psychic? I'm like, no.
You're like, it's who you are. It's in the
Just,
genes.
it's just your blueprint. It's just, yeah,
Yeah,
here you are.
your
Yeah.
blueprint. And I imagine that sometimes feels freeing and
Hmm.
sometimes feels not that for people.
Exactly. Exactly. I think there's a lot more freedom in it
Okay.
and a lot more hope in it, because
Mhm.
you can make changes,
Yeah.
right? We are all so capable of making change. And so how it's like creating a team of people,
Mhm.
or getting around a group of people who are going to support you in making those changes.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
a party of one, it can be done, but why do that to yourself when you can have so much fun with a crew of people?
Yeah, doing it together. And like you
Yeah.
said, I went through that so I can speak openly about it. And I think that's really what we get to
Mhm.
see a lot in all that we do there is like, just, yeah, okay, that happened. Let me share, let me digest it. Let me,
Mhm. Mhm.
work through that with you alongside and
Yeah.
share and help and make that
Yeah.
ripple even more. And like you said, initially the course on shame, but I also think that's a lot of the feels that we often feel surrounding some of these struggles and things that
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
navigating. And it's nice to be in a space alongside other people like you where all of that is like the norm and
Right.
important. And
Mhm.
the more we don't do that, the more the disconnect is there and the more that
Right.
we're able to speak.
Right.
And like you even said, like you take something specific, niche down on what you're struggling with
Mhm.
specifically, but also in that big picture, it's just like more connection, more truth,
Right.
more, ability to just like own it and
Yep.
have this be part of that journey and what you're presently navigating, I think
Mhm.
is, um, yeah, so lovely. And one of my favorite things about talking on the podcast and hanging out. And your son was at the event, which was so cool. And
Such.
what did he think? And what did he have a choice in coming? What was his key takeaways? And how do you parent in a
Mhm.
mindful way and
Mhm.
teach
Mhm.
mindfulness to a teenager? Because that's probably not, the simplest butter on bread task, or maybe it is. I don't know. I always think moms, I just love
No.
hearing from the way
Yeah.
we take what we learn and pass it on.
Yeah. I've done things really differently with my son. He wasn't allowed technology. He wasn't allowed a phone. He just got a phone at 15. Um, we're really kind of restrictive around technology and his brain. The American Pediatric Society had said, the maximum time a child should be on a device was 2 hours, and that was pre-pandemic. Then
Mhm.
pandemic hit, and it's all bets are off. So now kids are on their devices 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day.
Mhm.
And so when I think about that in my child, and I think about his genetic propensity and his DRDs, his genes, like I
Mhm.
know that can be a big challenge. So I lead by example, right? I have rules around how he uses technology.
Mhm.
He has no screen days where he's just completely off technology and he can read books all day. I don't care. He can go out to the park, he can go to the library, whatever. Um, but I think the biggest tool is around leading by example. And when he came to Austin, we were going on a road trip, the two of us. We were driving uh, up the coast of California, up to Oregon, up to Washington, up into Toronto, or not Toronto, Vancouver. So we were just in it together for like a month.
Mm.
And when we were in Austin,
It
he
was
was like,
just your next stop. Next stop, come meet my friends.
right? He was like, I need time, mom. Right? We have a relationship where he's like,
Yeah,
we need space. I need
yeah,
space from you.
yeah,
You just go do you. And I was like, yeah, I'll do me. And one of the great things was being at the pool and him meeting up with Charla and
Rob.
Robert, yeah.
Mhm.
And, him bonding with Robert, you know,
Yeah,
right? Like just hanging out by the pool, doing what he wanted to.
yeah.
And he has the confidence to do that now because, again, I've led by example. I'm super out there, go get him, approachable. I'm going to go have a conversation with, doesn't matter who. Like, I don't see somebody being more important than me or less important than me. I'm just going to start having a conversation with somebody. So he kind of has that same sense about him. And it's just, again, inviting him into conversations that are challenging, that he doesn't want to have. I constantly do that as well. And ask him why. Like, why are you guys doing that? You wouldn't get it, Mom. But tell me more. So I'm constantly kind of asking him to use his brain to think about things so he can express himself. Which this generation and these pandemic kids, their math skills are down, their reading skills are down, their social academics are down, like everything, right? So I've been kind of very proactive in supporting him, and it's still a challenge.
Yeah. Tell me more, engaging more.
Engaging more. Yeah.
Like you said, to be that example. I was talking to this guy, Brian. We chatted for the podcast on Friday, and he just talks. His message is random acts of kindness and just being in the goodness game of just giving. And, and I asked him that too of, he has 3 teenage boys, I think he said. I'm like, how do you parent that? Do you and he's like, oh yeah, well, lead by example. And we have a giving portion of all the money that we bring in that we just do for, if they get $10 for allowance, you put $1 in the giving jar. And there's just certain things we do. But like you said, it's a lot of it is just you're with them day in and day out, be that, and then they'll see that. And then it becomes part of, I mean, granted phones were different too when we first got our phones, but mine was 15 or 16, like when I started driving. And so I'm not a parent, but sometimes I think about that because I work with a lot of kids, and I'm like, probably when you drive. And even now there's the watches that you can call from or track from, which I think is cool because then I remember when we didn't have cell phone or anything, and I was probably like, Mom, I'm going to go to a friend's house. And I probably was at a friend's house, but maybe not that friend's house.
Right. Somewhere else. Right. I think there's also, I think about, in contrast to my life and growing up, I was drinking at 16. I was already starting into my addiction. So, am I keeping a tight grip on him? 100% I am. But I also, because of the household that I grew up in and the time that I grew up in, it's very different than it is now. It's mandatory that we eat all together, 6:30. We're sitting at the dinner table together. He one night a week gets to sit by himself. It's like we have a structured life. There's scaffolding in place to support him in his well-being. And I think, again, this is by choice that I've done this, and it hasn't been convenient at all. I'll just say that. But I also really understand and know my history, my life, and I know other kids that are out there. It's a mess. I'm just going to say it. It's a mess. It's fine. But there's also a lot of families that are together.
And you work with people who see a lot, and know a lot, and that's your arena. So, so you the dinner time is you're at home. We know where you're at 6:30 p.m. We're winding down for the evening. You're not out and about getting into.
Yeah, he has a bedtime. He's in bed. Lights are out by 9:15. End of story. Where other teenagers right now are going to bed at 10, 11 o'clock, and he understands his body rhythm. He's tapped into that. He understands that when he's on the phone, he gets a headache. His emotional intelligence is tapped in, which at the end of the day, if that's all I've done, I've won the game here on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. The EQ.
Yeah.
Powerful. Yeah. So important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm thinking about
Mm-hmm.
me at that age and yeah, starting to, like you said, drink and
Mm-hmm.
smoke
Mm-hmm.
weed and
Mm-hmm.
just more and lots of things.
Yeah.
And my parents also had us in bed at, 8:30. We were supposed to be in bed. We had dinner all together. And I was also out the window partying a lot. And I share that because, and I've talked to my parents openly and honestly about this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the boundaries were there, but I don't think always the communication. It was just like, you're not
Yeah.
allowed to do anything and
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would always want to go to the friend's house that the parents were a little bit more lenient, not to say that was right or wrong, but as a kid, that's what I wanted. I just
Yep.
I feel like maybe the leash was a little bit too tight.
Yep.
And I, joke about that with my parents now and we talk about things. So it's all good. But I had that and I was still you know, doing all the things. And I'm still grateful looking back now for that structure. And I think that was
Mm-hmm.
important for my brain and learning about
Mm-hmm.
the developing
Mm-hmm.
brain and maybe, certain disconnects I had genetically and maybe still do have. I really want to get all my testing done with you. This is making me think about things, but did not have probably as much emotional intelligence as your son and was very impulsive for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I think now I probably navigate in ways of using mindfulness practices to be less
Yeah.
impulsive, but I can see how that even in my emotional reactions to certain things, communication style, areas
Yep.
where I really have to
Yep.
do a little
Yep.
tug back there.
Yep.
And yeah, like a very young age. And then, yeah, in some instances, right? Like in your case and people that you work with, it becomes like a real thing that you navigate
Yep.
daily. And I just
Yep.
think I think Desiree might have commented on one of your posts that you shared about just how people in recovery is just so motivating for her to just see how the
Mm-hmm.
moment by moment activation of people in
Mm-hmm.
that space is. And so I'm sure somebody listening is in recovery or knows someone who's in recovery or wants to be in recovery, or maybe this is what they're listening to know that it's the next best step for their journey. Like, what's that been like? And like you said, 15, you were already drinking. I mean, fast forward to the last 10 months I've known you, like, how did that go in your life? And how did you find the
Mm.
connections to?
Yeah. Uh, I'm very fast. Like I like to do things fast. My nickname was Fast Lane. Uh,
Life in the fast
yeah,
lane.
just I'm going, right? And so, drinking, I did fast. I was messy fast. And then when I fell into recovery, this was like the best thing ever. And it happened fast. Like I did not, once I had my last drink, I didn't drink again. I took to, uh, I'm fortunate enough to say that I got sober through the 12 steps
Mhm.
and it stuck with me. And I use the 12 steps because those are spiritual principles. Um, and they're principles that I found in Buddhism. They're principles that I found in Christianity. They're principles that I have found in Judaism. They are principles. And so those principles help me survive and thrive in my life. And I just continue to go back to them.
Mhm.
Uh, and a lot of people kind of get hung up on uh, terminology. And a lot of people get hung up with Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mhm.
And a lot of
Okay.
people get hung up on smart recovery. And it's just like, stop labeling it all.
Mhm.
Just find what works for you and do it. Like that's it. Whatever is going to work for you, do it. And as long as you're happy, right? There's a lot of talk in the recovery communities around, people die. People die. And we don't know it because they're dead. And there's a lot of statistics. So why not, start changing that conversation around being a sober statistic? Why not become alcohol free and change your life? Because what happens as a result of stopping one habit, the action of drinking, your whole life changes, which is so profound to me. And it could be stopping smoking cigarettes, but it's the addictive quality, that addiction, stopping that one thing, that one behavior is the domino that changes your whole life, which is profound to me, which is it's a spiritual, it goes back to that spiritual act. Everything is spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. Find what works for you and stick to it. I like when you said it was very fast and then getting in recovery and having that happen fast. It made me think of a close friend of mine. I just remembered she was, in recovery, same thing. Just like when she decided, and then she's been sober for years, I think maybe over a decade now. And she's like, oh yeah, it's just like in that moment, it went from everything to nothing.
Yeah.
And, she just,
and that it can be that simple. That is what is so amazing, Lunden, is that it's that decision and you're done. And people get all heady about it and start thinking, where thinking is the problem, because addiction is a mental illness, which is a thinking problem. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's a drinking problem or a smoking problem or a too much sex problem, when in reality, it's the thinking, it's the cognition. So if you make a decision, I'm done, then you don't have to ruminate about it anymore.
Yeah. Make that decision that I'm done. A friend of mine one time, when I was not being mindful and not in the present moment, but we love friends like this.
Yeah.
She snapped in the middle of my face and she goes, Lunden, this moment is inevitable. This moment is inevitable. And this moment, she just kept going.
Yeah.
We love Trisha. We love friends like Trisha. And just brought me back to that like split second decision moment of just like and it just reminded me in that moment to come back to that. Yeah. Of course, the snap just, brought me right back to that rhythm and there, but also, brought me back to like, hey, you're kind of wasting precious moments. You're not here yet, like come back here and, remember it can be that split second decision. And I'm assuming with recovery, it's multiple bajillions of split second decisions, moment by moment, and that's kind of bringing you back to the present of, no, I'm still choosing this, and who I want to be in this moment is this. But the tug of war, I always think of like a Stretch Armstrong, that old cool toy of like, we're over here in the future and in the past. And there's a lot of, generous fertileness to the present moment that we get to have. And the thought, like you said, that's not the problem. It's the thought. What's the thought? What was the thought for you? What's the thought that you get to not have anymore or get to reframe?
That I need to drink to get through anything.
Yeah.
That I need to check out. Like there is nothing worth checking out anymore. Like the present moment is amazing. But I was never taught that. Like there's a bunch of skills that I was just never taught because my parents weren't, they were young hippies. Right? So it's like, they didn't know, my grandma didn't know that her grandma, like it just, again, it's generational. So that's why, for me and my son, it's like, I am very present with him. It's intentional on how my husband and I are raising him, more so for me, but yeah.
Yeah. Reminding him of, like you said, and then with technology and all the things, that's another Stretch Armstrong pulling us in different directions.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many people do you work with on a regular basis that have gotten sober? Like, do you know the ripple of being life in the fast lane and now helping people get in their lane? Do you know how many people you've impacted? I feel like you've helped so many people.
Thousands by this time. It's thousands.
I know you have.
Yeah. It's, and now that I have the Sobriety for Dummies book, it's even more so, right? So it's like, it just keeps going, and I'm not Like I'm not in charge of that.
Yeah.
Like I just show up and I serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was not the plan though. Let me tell you that. Like my plan was I was on my way, fashion, modeling. That was the plan. Like
Oh yeah. And you were a supermodel, weren't you?
who was I serving then? Like,
Not that I
yeah,
forgot, but
Tom
we're just
Ford. Yeah,
we're
that's
on that
great.
topic. But
Gucci.
like and do you sometimes I think about this too, because I feel like there's been a lot of cool compartments of my life,
Mhm.
highs, lows, whatever. But
Mhm.
you're like, oh shit, I was a supermodel. I did this, man, like you said, and it's not the plan. It's just like when you are in that present space, you just kind of get a little dance in very cool directions.
Yeah. Yeah. I can reflect on my life and just be like, that's really cool. I was able to do all that and I didn't die. Like that's cool.
I got through all that and lived to
Yeah.
tell about it.
Yeah.
And like you said, a lot of people don't. Why not become the statistic in the other direction? Do you still go to meetings and?
I do.
Yeah.
I do in principle. It's just the principle of service and showing that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a place for me to go when I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I hold that space for others.
Yeah. I love that. So fantastic. The principle of service.
Mm-hmm.
Where can we connect with you even further? If we want to do DNA testing, or you mentioned your book, Sobriety for Dummies. I'm going to link everything in the description, but tell us that part.
Everything is at lanekennedy.com. I have a mindfulness app. I have the Sobriety for Dummies. I have DNA, all of it, lanekennedy.com. You can find me there.
Yay.
Easy.
Thank you so much for this lovely conversation today. And thank you guys for listening. I feel like there's so many avenues for listeners just to, learn and become, more aware of the opportunities that are available for them, and ways, like you said, where it's not your fault, but you get to do a more specific dance with people that also get to do your specific dance. And I just feel like there's so many ways to plug into what you have. And I'm so grateful to know you, and I'm excited to keep getting to know you.
I know. It's so amazing. Like I feel like I wake up in the morning now. It's like I'm unpackaging or unwrapping this gift of life. And it's like, who do I get to play with? Who do I get to hang out with? Who do I get to meet?
Who do I get to play with?
Yeah, it's like every day it's new and exciting for me. And I never want to take that for granted. Like that's what living for me is all about. It's like being present and continuing to unwrap that present. It's a gift.
Thank you for being here, Lane. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you at the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self Love and Sweat the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or were inspired by it or something resonated with you, do me a favor and share this episode with a friend, someone that you think might enjoy this episode as well. That's the ultimate compliment and the best way to make this podcast ripple out into the world of others. And also you can leave us a review up to 5 stars wherever you're listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next episode. I appreciate you.